Howdy. This webcast is being recorded in October of 2020 in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. And one of the things that we are seeing right now is a lot of buyers chasing very low inventory. A lot of buyers chasing very low inventory. And so it's not at all unusual if the property is properly priced for a seller to receive 5, 7 offers on a property. The imbalance creates a lot of leverage, gives a lot of clout to sellers in these situations. But we also see a phenomenon where sellers, sometimes enabled by their listing brokers, give up that clout too early in the deal and have remorse about it later. Let me give you an example. Of those 5 offers that the seller receives on a property, there is often 2 that are the best offers. One offer is best because it is at a higher price. Let's say this price is $530,000. This offer is roughly equivalent, at least to the seller, even though it's at a lower price, $500,000. This is a buyer that is represented as an all-cash buyer, magic words, all-cash buyer. And the seller, for the seller's reasons, decides to trade top dollar for the, quote, all-cash buyer. And part of the reason that the seller has confidence that this is an all-cash buyer is this buyer has submitted their offer without any financing contingency at all. It doesn't specify any of the terms of any financing. The buyer represents that they do have the cash to bring to the closing and that they will provide proof of funds, say within 24 hours of going under contract or 3 days of going under contract. Well, the scenarios that we see, the deal goes under contract and then the buyer comes up with a proof of funds. And the seller is expecting to see the mutual fund statement or the bank statement or the brokerage firm account statement showing that the buyer has this $530,000 liquid in an account. And in the cases that we see, it's something different. The buyer's idea of proof of funds is that they can draw on their trust, that they are not the trustee of, or that they have a line of credit on their business that they can draw on. Or maybe the proof of funds from the buyer is the buyer has their business under contract, and when that closes, they will have the funds. Sometimes it is a statement from the CPA for the buyer that the buyer has the ability to liquidate assets and raise the $500,000 with which to purchase the property. And the seller cries foul. That's not proof of funds, and wants to kick the buyer out of the deal. Well, if the contract language regarding proof of funds is written very, very precisely, then the seller, maybe after going to court and getting a judge to rule in the case, would have the ability to kick a reluctant buyer out of the deal. But the buyer, just by getting their nose in the tent, so to speak, just by getting the deal under contract, all of a sudden the buyer has the advantage in that situation. Even if the seller can easily terminate the contract, the termination of that contract itself creates a stigmatization potentially that the reason the contract died was because the buyer bailed on the contract due to inspection reasons. If there's a theme to this presentation, don't let the buyer get their nose in the tent. Don't, analogizing to the don't let the camel get its nose in the tent. Don't let the buyer get the nose in the tent. Sort these things out before the buyer goes under contract. Don't reply with a counterproposal calling for the buyer to provide proof of funds within 24 hours of mutual execution of the contract. No, before responding with a counterproposal, get the proof of funds from the buyer. Same thing about loan commitments. We see language in contracts that require the buyer to provide a firm or solid loan commitment. Sometimes the language that is in these contracts purports to be very precise. I'll show you an example of this. I'm projecting on the screen right now something that is, it's a language that I've seen that the buyer must submit a pre-qualification letter. And it's not any pre-qualification letter. We're specifying some details of this qualification letter. The qualification letter must stipulate that. And then there are these 3 things here. And boy, if they 4 things, A, B, C, D. And if the pre-qualification letter does not have all 4 things, the agreement shall terminate. Really? First of all, the lenders often don't see this stuff. They don't tailor their language of their pre-qual letter to match this. They just pull something off of their word processing system to issue the pre-qualification letter. Even if the lender's thinking about it, they might not be able to certify to all of these things. What if the lender is spot on in 3, but not the 4th item? And then even if the borrower admits that the pre-qualification letter doesn't satisfy all 4 of these things, the seller may not want the agreement to terminate. The seller might want to keep the deal alive. What we see is more often skirmishing that the pre-qual letter that the buyer provide did comply in good faith. Then what's a broker supposed to do in this situation? Is the broker supposed to amend the contract to say, even though the pre-qual letter satisfied only 2 of the 4 items, notwithstanding the language here that it's supposed to terminate, the contract lives? Avoid that ambiguity, avoid that complexity. Take the issues off the table before the deal goes under contract in the first place. Sort out whether this buyer is really better before going under contract with the buyer. That's it. I am going to stop my share. You will be able to see my mug bigger now, but we've come to the end of the webcast. Remember, it's a complicated world out there. Be careful.